Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The recycled air tasted of ozone and regret. Kalen felt it coat his tongue, a familiar film he had long since stopped trying to wash away. He stood on the gantry overlooking Containment Sector Gamma, a place where the station's sterile white corridors gave way to the brutalist gray of reinforced plasteel. Below him, the hum of the power conduits was a constant, oppressive drone, a sound that vibrated up through the soles of his worn boots and settled deep in his bones. It was the sound of a slow death, the station's and his own. For 10 years, he had worn the slate-gray uniform of the Xanthos Corporation, first as a soldier in their pacification campaigns, now as chief of security on this godforsaken rock, asteroid 73B, officially designated Xanthos Deep Mine Epsilon. The title was a joke. He was a jailer. His reflection stared back from the polarized viewport, a ghost superimposed over the dim light of the holding cell below. The face was a map of old wars and bad decisions. A scar cut a pale crescent from his left temple to his jaw, a memento from a corporate skirmish over a gas giant no one even remembered the name of now. His eyes were the color of faded fatigues, tired and empty of everything but a disciplined watchfulness. He ran a hand over his shorn head, the gesture automatic, a nervous tick from a life spent waiting for the next explosion. He was a functionary, a cog in a machine that ground worlds into dust for profit. He collected his pay, followed his protocols, and tried not to think about the man he had been before the uniform. Down in the cell, the specimen was still. It was designated XC-01, but the miners who had found it, the ones who survived, had called it a wraith. She, was humanoid in shape, tall and impossibly slender, with skin the color of moon dust and hair like spun silver that seemed to float in the low gravity of the containment field. She did not move, did not eat the nutrient paste they slid through the slot, did not react to the diagnostic scans that probed her body. She simply knelt in the center of the sterile chamber, a statue of silent defiance. The corporation saw a potential weapon, a biological power source, an asset to be cataloged and exploited. Kalen saw a prisoner. It was a distinction that no longer mattered to his superiors. His comm unit chimed softly, a single, polite tone that grated on his nerves. It was Voss. Chief Kalen. Report. The voice was sharp, clipped, full of the self-important zeal of a man who enjoyed his authority a little too much. Voss was his second in command, a corporate man to the core, with a spine of polished chrome and a heart to match. No change, Captain, Kalen replied, his own voice a low rasp. Asset is dormant. Vitals are stable but depressed. Energy output is negligible. He recited the lines from memory, the same report he gave 3 times a shift. The administrator is growing impatient, Chief. He wants results. He wants to know what it is, what it can do. The preliminary reports mentioned a significant energy discharge upon discovery. The preliminary reports also mentioned 4 dead miners and a melted excavator, Kalen said flatly. Patience is a virtue when dealing with the unknown, Captain. A dry chuckle came through the comm. Patience doesn't appear on a balance sheet. Keep your watch, the line went dead. Kalen clenched his jaw. Men like Voss saw the universe as a ledger, a series of assets and liabilities. This creature, this woman, was just another number in a column. He looked down at her again. Her head was bowed, the cascade of silver hair obscuring her face. For a moment, he felt a flicker of something he had not allowed himself to feel in a very long time. It was a dangerous, useless emotion. It was pity. He watched her for another hour, the silence broken only by the station's thrumming heartbeat. The nutrient paste remained untouched. The water dispenser in her cell had malfunctioned 2 shifts ago, a minor issue buried under a mountain of maintenance requests. Protocol dictated that assets were sustained intravenously if they refused sustenance. It was efficient. It was impersonal. It was cruel. He did not know why he did it. It was not a conscious decision, not a planned act of rebellion. It was an impulse, a ghost of a forgotten moral code twitching back to life. He keyed in his override code on the gantry console, the sequence of numbers and symbols as familiar as his own name. A heavy panel hissed open at his feet, revealing a small service lift. He stepped onto the platform and descended into the antechamber of the containment cell. The air here was colder, charged with the energy of the containment field that shimmered like heat haze on a distant road. He took a clean water flask from a standard emergency kit on the wall. The plasteel was cool in his hand. He approached the transfer lock, a thick slab of metal and reinforced glass designed for passing samples and equipment into the cell. He bypassed the automated system, manually cycling the outer door. He placed the flask inside the small chamber, his movements precise and economical. He hesitated. This was a breach of a dozen different protocols. Voss would have him confined to quarters for a week if he found out. He did not care. He cycled the inner door. It slid open with a soft pneumatic sigh. Inside the cell, the woman stirred. Her head lifted slowly, and for the first time, Kalen saw her face. It was a construction of sharp, elegant angles, her eyes large and luminous, the color of a nebula seen through a deep space telescope. They were not human eyes. They held an ancient, weary intelligence. They focused on the water flask, then lifted to meet his gaze through the viewport. There was no fear in them, only a profound and bottomless sorrow. She did not move toward the water. She simply watched him. He felt an inexplicable urge to say something, to explain the gesture, but the words died in his throat. What could he say? Here is water. I am sorry they have caged you. It was absurd. He was the chief of her jailers. He was part of the machine. Then it happened. A soft chime echoed through the antechamber, not from his comm, but from the cell's diagnostic panel. A new energy signature, faint but distinct, bloomed on the screen. It was not coming from the containment field projectors. It was coming from her. Her luminous eyes held his, and he felt a strange warmth spread through his mind. It was not a sound, not a voice, but a feeling, a pure and unfiltered sensation of gratitude. It was a whisper of cool water on a parched tongue, the feeling of shade after a long walk under a burning sun. It was a connection so alien and yet so fundamentally understandable that it knocked the air from his lungs. And then all hell broke loose. The chime on the panel escalated into a shrill, piercing alarm. Red lights strobed across the ceiling, painting the gray walls in frantic splashes of crimson. A synthesized voice, devoid of emotion, blared from the overhead speakers. Containment breach imminent. Sector Gamma. Unidentified energy surge detected. All personnel to lockdown stations. Kalen swore, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm holstered at his hip. The warmth in his mind vanished, replaced by the cold dread of his own monumental foolishness. The energy readings on the diagnostic panel spiked, the numbers climbing at an impossible rate. The containment field around the cell flickered, the air crackling with raw power. He saw her rise to her feet, her slender form now radiating a soft, white light. She had not been dormant. She had been waiting. Or perhaps, his simple act of kindness had been the key, the catalyst she needed. His calm crackled to life, Voss's voice a panicked snarl. Kalen, what did you do? The field is destabilizing. My teams are on their way. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. Kalen ignored him. He looked from the screaming monitors to the woman in the cell. Her power was growing, and the station's systems were failing to contain it. In moments, the field would collapse, and the resulting energy discharge would likely vaporize the entire sector, himself included. He was a dead man. He could run, try to make it to a blast door, or he could face the consequences of his actions. He looked into her eyes again. The sorrow was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. A question, an offer. The metal of the gantry above him groaned under the strain. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. He had two choices. Die here for the corporation that owned his life, or die with the prisoner he had just, in some small way, set free. It was not much of a choice at all. He slammed his hand on the emergency release panel for the cell door. It was a last resort, a protocol designed to vent the cell's atmosphere into space in the event of a catastrophic biological outbreak. He did not activate the vent. He activated the door release. Manual override engaged. The synthesized voice announced calmly amidst the chaos. Cell door cycle initiated. Kalen, you fool. Abort. Voss screamed over the comm. With a shuddering groan that shook the entire deck, the massive plasteel door to the cell began to retract. The containment field collapsed with a deafening implosion of sound and light, a wave of force that threw Kalen back against the far wall of the antechamber. His head connected with a conduit, and the world dissolved into a smear of red and white. Through the ringing in his ears, he saw her step out of the cell. The light around her was blinding, but it was not destructive. She moved through the storm of arcing electricity and failing systems with an impossible grace. Heavy footsteps thundered down the corridor. Voss's security team. They wore heavy exoskeletons, their pulse rifles raised. They were walking into their own funeral. Kalen pushed himself to his feet, his vision swimming. He drew his sidearm, the weight of it a familiar, cold comfort. He was security chief. His duty was to contain the threat. But the threat was not her. The threat was the men coming to kill her. He stumbled into the corridor, placing himself between her and the approaching soldiers. "Hold your fire," he yelled, his voice raw. Voss appeared at the front of the formation, his faceplate retracted. His expression was a mask of pure fury. "Traitor, stand down, Kalen, or we will open fire." "She's not hostile," Kalen yelled back, knowing how insane it sounded. "She killed 4 of my miners and destroyed 1,000,000 credits of equipment." "Step aside," Voss ordered, raising his own rifle. Behind Kalen, the woman, Lyra, the name bloomed in his mind, a gift from her, raised a hand. The air grew heavy, thick with a pressure he could feel in his teeth. He risked a glance back. The light around her was coalescing, her silver hair whipping around her as if caught in a phantom wind. He knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that she was about to unleash a power that would not distinguish between him and the corporate soldiers. She was a cornered animal, ready to lash out. He made another choice. He turned his back on Voss's team and faced her, lowering his weapon. He held up his empty hands, a universal gesture of peace he hoped she would understand. He focused on the memory of the feeling she had sent him, the cool water, the gratitude. He projected it back at her, a silent, desperate plea. "Don't. We can get out of here. Together." For a heart-stopping second, the pressure intensified. The metal walls of the corridor began to buckle. Then, as quickly as it had built, the energy dissipated. The blinding light around her softened to a gentle glow. Her hand lowered. Her nebula eyes met his, and he felt a new message, not of gratitude, but of trust. A fragile, tentative thing, born in an act of compassion and sealed in a moment of shared peril. Voss took that moment to act. "Fire," he bellowed. The corridor erupted in a storm of plasma fire. Kalen reacted without thinking, his years of training taking over. He threw himself to the side, tackling Lyra and pulling her down behind the wreckage of a service drone. Superheated bolts of energy seared the air where they had been standing, leaving molten craters in the bulkhead. The alliance was forged. The bond was established. Now, they just had to survive the next 5 minutes. He came to his senses with the taste of scorched metal in his mouth and Lyra's slender weight against him. The plasma volley had stopped, replaced by the cautious advance of armored boots. He peered over their cover. Voss's team was moving forward in formation, shields raised, rifles sweeping the corridor. They were pinned down. "This way," a voice whispered in his mind. It was her, Lyra. Not words, but a clear, directional impulse. An image of a maintenance conduit hidden behind a damaged wall panel. He nodded, a barely perceptible motion. He unslung the small satchel of breaching charges from his belt. Standard equipment. He rarely had cause to use them. He armed a low-yield charge, the timer set for 3 seconds. "Cover your eyes," he muttered, not knowing if she could understand the words, but the intent was clear. He lobbed the charge over their cover. It landed amidst the advancing soldiers with a soft thud. There was a moment of confusion, then a brilliant, concussive flash. It was not enough to penetrate their armor, but it would blind their optics and deafen their sensors for a precious few seconds. As the flashbang detonated, Lyra moved. She did not run. She flowed. She rose and swept a hand through the air. A wave of kinetic force, visible only as a shimmer in the stunned silence, slammed into the disoriented soldiers. It did not kill them, but it threw the armored men back down the corridor like discarded toys, their heavy suits crashing against the walls. It was a display of controlled, precise power. She had saved his life. He did not waste the opening. He scrambled to the wall panel she had shown him, wrenched it open with a grunt, and plunged into the darkness of the service tunnel beyond. He turned and helped her through, his hand closing around her surprisingly solid arm. Her skin was cool to the touch, like polished stone. He pulled the panel shut behind them, plunging them into absolute blackness. The sounds of the firefight and the alarms faded, replaced by the drip of unseen condensation and the frantic pounding of his own heart. They were alive. They were fugitives. They moved through the station's forgotten guts, a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and ventilation shafts that was not on any official schematic. Lyra was his guide. She seemed to sense the path, leading him through the maze with an unerring certainty. The whispers in his mind were clearer now, a stream of images and intentions that were more efficient than spoken language. A warning of a patrol passing overhead. The location of a functional power junction where he could recharge his multi-tool. A feeling of which tunnels were structurally sound and which were ready to collapse. He learned more about her in those first few hours of flight than the corporation scientists had in weeks of invasive scans. She was not a being of pure energy. She was flesh and blood, though clearly not of any known biology. She tired. She needed to rest. When she used her abilities, a faint tracery of silver lines would appear on her skin, glowing softly before fading, like circuitry beneath a translucent surface. He saw her stumble once, her energy depleted after they bypassed a sealed pressure door by her simply vibrating its locking mechanism into dust. He caught her, his rough gloved hand supporting her, and felt a wave of her exhaustion and pain wash over him. In that moment, the roles were reversed. She was not the all-powerful entity. She was vulnerable, and he was her protector. They found a derelict storage bay deep in the unpressurized mining sector, a place long since stripped of anything valuable and forgotten by the station's maintenance crews. The only light came from the distant, star-dusted viewport, which looked out onto the scarred gray plains of the asteroid. They were safe, for now. He knew Voss would be tearing the station apart looking for them. They could not stay here forever. Kalen worked on salvaging a small emergency beacon, hoping to modify its frequency to send a coded message to the one person in this system who might help him. It was a long shot. While he worked, Lyra rested. She did not sleep as humans do. She entered a state of stillness, her body becoming as immobile as stone, her breathing slowing until it was almost imperceptible. He watched her, the faint starlight catching the silver of her hair. He felt a connection to her that transcended his duty, his cynicism, his entire life up to this point. He had broken protocol for her. He had become a traitor for her. He had to know why. As if sensing his thoughts, her eyes opened. They glowed faintly in the dark. She reached out, her long, slender fingers not quite touching his temple. An avalanche of images and feelings poured into his mind. He saw a world not of rock and dust, but of vibrant, crystalline life. He saw a species that lived in symbiosis with their planet, a vast, slow-thinking consciousness that slumbered in the planet's core. He saw them not as individuals, but as notes in a single, complex song. Then he saw the ships of the Xanthos Corporation arrive. He saw the mining lasers, great spears of incandescent light, stabbing into the planet, cracking its crystalline surface. He felt the planet's pain, a deep, resonant agony that echoed through its people. He saw Lyra, a guardian, a warden of her world's song, fighting back. She had destroyed the first mining excavator not out of malice, but in a desperate attempt to stop the piercing shriek of the laser that was driving her world mind into madness. She had been overwhelmed, captured, and brought here, to the very heart of the operation that was killing her home. The truth settled upon him with the weight of a mountain. Xanthos was not just mining an asteroid. They were murdering a world. The administrator, the man at the top of this station, knew. He was not just after minerals. He was trying to harness the death throes of a planetary consciousness, believing it would be the ultimate power source. Kalen had not just been a jailer. He had been an accessory to genocide. The revelation was a physical blow, leaving him hollowed out and shaking with a cold, silent rage. He looked down at his hands, at the corporate logo on his gloves. He had served this machine for a decade. He had fought its wars, enforced its laws, and never once questioned the morality of his orders. He had traded his conscience for a steady paycheck and a quiet life. Now, the bill for that transaction had come due. Lyra's mental voice was soft, a feeling of deep sorrow. They are breaking the song of the first stone. Soon, it will scream. When it does, it will shatter. And this star system will shatter with it. The cataclysm she spoke of was not a threat, it was a diagnosis. The unstable energy readings the station had been detecting were the fever spikes of a dying god. When the consciousness in the core finally broke apart, it would release a wave of raw chaos that would tear apart every ship, every station, every moon in the system. The corporation's greed was about to sign the death warrant for thousands of innocent people. He looked at Lyra, at the immense burden she carried. Then he looked at his own scars. The one on his face was from shrapnel. But he had others, deeper ones that no one could see. Scars left by the things he had done in the corporation's name, the villages he had helped pacify, the protests he had helped crush. He had told himself it was just a job. He had told himself he was a soldier following orders. He had lied. He reached up and unfastened the collar of his uniform, revealing a jagged scar on his neck from a plasma burn he had taken on Cygnus X-1. It was a constant, itching reminder of his past. Lyra extended a tentative hand and gently traced the scar with her fingertip. As she did, he felt a flicker of her own pain, an image of a crystalline spire on her world shattering, leaving a wound on the landscape that mirrored the one on his skin. A shared understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of their mutual wounds, inflicted by the same enemy. In that quiet moment of vulnerability, his purpose solidified. He was no longer just her protector. He was her ally. His war was now her war. Their journey out of the station and onto the asteroid's surface was a desperate flight through hell. Voss was no fool. He had anticipated they would try to escape, and he had locked down every major hangar bay and docking port. They were forced to use an emergency waste ejection chute, a nauseating, high-speed ride that spat them out into the harsh vacuum of space. Kalen's suit held, its systems complaining but functional. Lyra needed no suit. A thin, shimmering field of energy enveloped her, protecting her from the cold and the vacuum. They used his suit's thrusters to navigate the short distance from the station to the asteroid's surface, landing in a cloud of gray dust in the shadow of a massive mining rig. The surface of asteroid 73B was a landscape of industrial nightmare. Towering excavators, silent and inert between shifts, stood like skeletal giants against the black, star-dusted sky. Deep canyons, carved by corporate lasers, crisscrossed the terrain. The only light came from the cold, distant sun and the running lights of the station orbiting above them, a constant, watchful eye. Their pursuers would not be far behind. They traveled for days, or what passed for days in the slow rotation of the asteroid. They moved through the laser-carved canyons, staying out of sight of the station's sensors. It was a shared ordeal that stripped away the last vestiges of their separate identities and forged them into a single unit. He taught her how to read his suit's telemetry, how to help him patch a micrometeoroid puncture with emergency sealant. She, in turn, guided them, sensing the patrols before they appeared, finding caves of strange, glowing crystals where they could rest, and where the energy seemed to soothe her and replenish her strength. Their communication evolved beyond simple images and intentions. It became a silent, intuitive dialogue. He would think of their dwindling oxygen supply, and she would guide him to a wrecked exploratory vehicle with half-full tanks. She would feel a tremor in the rock, the pain of her world mind, and he would find a place for her to rest and meditate, standing guard over her still form with his pulse rifle at the ready. It was during one of these tremors that Voss found them. They had taken shelter in a vast cavern, the walls lined with the same luminous crystals Lyra had sought out. The tremor was violent, shaking dust from the ceiling, and Lyra cried out, a sound of pure agony that echoed in Kalen's mind. She collapsed, the silver lines on her skin flaring brightly. He knelt beside her, helpless, as the pain of a dying world coursed through her. That was when the lights flooded the cavern entrance. 3 armored figures, led by Voss, rappelled down from the surface. Their helmet lamps cut through the gloom, pinning Kalen and Lyra in their glare. Nowhere left to run, Kalen. Voss's voice boomed from his suit's external speaker. The administrator wants the asset back. He's willing to overlook your treason if you cooperate. Hand her over. Kalen rose slowly, placing himself in front of Lyra's weakened form. He raised his rifle. That's not going to happen, Voss. I was afraid you'd say that, Voss said, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. I have my orders. The asset is to be recovered. You are expendable. The fight was brutal and short. They were in a cavern, a confined space that nullified the corporate soldiers' numerical advantage. Kalen was a veteran of 100 dirty wars fought in tunnels and corridors just like this one. He used the terrain, ducking behind crystalline pillars, firing calculated shots at the joints in their armor. He moved with a deadly efficiency that Voss, the corporate officer, could not match. He took down one of the soldiers with a shot to the helmet's optical sensor, followed by another to the suit's power pack. The suit sparked and collapsed. But Voss was different. He was driven by a fanaticism that made him fast and reckless. He charged Kalen, firing his pulse rifle on full auto, forcing Kalen back. A plasma bolt caught Kalen in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending a jolt of agony through his body. His suit's diagnostic screamed warnings in his ear. He fell to one knee, his rifle clattering on the stone floor. Voss stood over him, rifle aimed at his head. "It's over. You chose the wrong side." Behind Voss, Lyra began to stir. Her eyes opened, no longer glowing with soft light, but burning with cold, white fire. The pain of her world had been focused into a razor's edge of pure rage. She rose, and the entire cavern began to vibrate with her power. The luminous crystals on the walls pulsed in time with her heartbeat, growing brighter and brighter. "What is this?" Voss stammered, turning to face her. The remaining soldier took a step back, his bravado evaporating in the face of this raw, untamable power. "No," Kalen projected towards her, pouring all his will into the thought. "Don't kill them. We need to stop the mining. This is not the way." She hesitated, her power wavering. She was caught between her agony and his plea. Voss saw his chance. He turned his rifle back on Kalen. But in that split second, Kalen acted. He lunged forward, not for his rifle, but for Voss's legs. He tackled the larger man, driving him backward. They crashed to the ground, and Kalen's hand found the emergency release for Voss's helmet. With a hiss of decompressing air, the helmet disengaged. Voss gasped, his face contorted in shock and fury. Before Voss could recover, Lyra acted. She did not strike him with a wave of force. She simply touched his forehead with her fingertips. Voss's eyes went wide. His body went rigid. Kalen scrambled back, watching as Lyra shared with Voss the same truth she had shared with him. She showed him the song of the first stone. She showed him the life they were extinguishing. She made him feel the planet's pain. It lasted only a few seconds, but when she removed her hand, Voss was a broken man. He collapsed to the ground, sobbing, the zealous light in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a horrifying, profound understanding of his own crimes. The last soldier, witnessing his commander's breakdown, dropped his weapon and surrendered. They left Voss and his man there, disarmed and shattered. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. As they climbed out of the cavern, Lyra's message came to Kalen's mind, heavy with resignation. "The tremors are closer now. The final breaking is near. We cannot fight our way through the station. The administrator has brought in the fleet. They are preparing to defend their prize." He looked up at the orbiting station, then at the corporate cruisers that had taken up positions around it, their weapon ports aglow. She was right. A direct assault was suicide. A military victory was impossible. The sheer scale of the corporation's power was overwhelming. The conflict threatened to consume not just them, but the entire system when the world mind finally died. They found a high ridge overlooking the primary mining operation, the place they called the Maw. It was a colossal pit, miles wide, that led down into the very core of the asteroid. At the bottom, the main laser was firing continuously, a lance of pure energy drilling into the heart of the world. It was the source of the planet's agony. "We have to stop that laser," Kalen said, his voice grim. "Destroying it will not be enough," Lyra said. "The damage is done. The song is too fragmented. It cannot heal itself. It will still shatter." Her sorrow was a palpable thing, a cold weight in his soul. "Then what can we do?" he asked, the words raw. Her answer was slow to come, delivered through a sequence of images that were both beautiful and terrifying. She showed him the core, not as it was now, a place of torment, but as it was meant to be, a nexus of harmonious energy. She showed him a ritual, an ancient rite of her people. A warden could merge with the core, their own life force becoming a new heart for the song, a living thread to bind the shattered pieces back together. The warden would cease to be an individual, their consciousness dissolving into the greater whole, becoming a silent, eternal guardian. It was the ultimate sacrifice. I was not strong enough, she explained, the thought tinged with shame. My capture, it weakened me. I cannot anchor the song now. My energy would dissipate before the union was complete. Kalen stared at the maw, at the beam of light that was a dagger in the heart of a living world. He understood what she was not saying. A solution existed, but the one who was meant to enact it was no longer capable. The impossible choice was laid bare. He thought about his life. A series of rented rooms, of temporary allegiances, of wars fought for causes he did not believe in. He had no family, no home to return to. His past was a litany of violence and regret. His future, before meeting Lyra, had been a slow, cynical fade into obsolescence. He had lived a life of taking orders, taking lives, taking a paycheck. He had never truly given anything. Here, at the edge of the abyss, he was being offered a chance to give everything. To save a world. To save the thousands of people on the station and the fleet who were blind to the doom their own greed was creating. To give Lyra back her home. To finally, after a lifetime of serving the machine, break it. The internal debate was not a storm. It was a quiet, cold calculus. His life, measured against the life of a world. His empty past, measured against a future of peace for countless others. It was no choice at all. It was an inevitability. It was the only order that had ever truly made sense. He turned to Lyra. The starlight reflected in her luminous eyes. He did not say a word. He simply reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. Then, he looked toward the maw and gave a single, determined nod. He had made his decision. Her reaction was not what he expected. He had anticipated sorrow, perhaps even a protest. Instead, he felt a wave of profound, heartbreaking respect. She understood. She accepted his choice. She bowed her head, and a single, crystalline tear trickled down her cheek, freezing instantly in the cold. She raised her hand and touched the side of his face, her cool fingers resting against his scarred cheek. In her touch, he felt her grief, her gratitude, and a promise. A promise that his sacrifice would not be forgotten. They planned their final assault with a grim efficiency. There was no hope of a stealthy infiltration. The station was on high alert. The administrator would have fortified the maw, the one place that mattered. Their only path was a direct one, a final, desperate charge. Lyra's strength had partially returned, but she would need to conserve it for the ritual. The fighting would fall to him. They descended into the maw, using a maintenance lift Kalen had jury-rigged. The shaft was a dizzying drop into the heart of the asteroid. The hum of the mining laser grew from a distant drone to a deafening roar that vibrated through the very structure of the lift. At the bottom, the pit opened into a vast chamber, a hellish space of raw energy and industrial machinery. The laser emitter, a monstrous construct of chrome and wiring, dominated the center of the room, its beam punching down into a shimmering, fractured well of light that was the exposed core of the world mind. And waiting for them, standing on a command platform overlooking the emitter, was the administrator. He was a small, precise man in an immaculate white uniform, flanked by the station's elite guard, soldiers in black armor that was a step above even Voss's. Voss himself was there, standing behind the administrator, his face pale and haunted, a prisoner in his own uniform. Kalen, the administrator's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by the station's comm system. It was calm, cultured, and utterly devoid of empathy. I must confess, I'm disappointed. I had such high hopes for you. But you let sentiment cloud your judgment. You've allied yourself with a resource. A valuable one, I admit, but a resource nonetheless. She's not a resource. And you're not a businessman. You're a strip miner, a grave robber, Kalen shouted back, his voice hoarse. He and Lyra took cover behind a massive power conduit. The administrator smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. Semantics. I am harnessing power that would otherwise go to waste. It is the logical, profitable course of action. I am offering you one last chance to step aside. We need the asset to stabilize the energy flow. Don't force me to damage her. Kalen looked at Lyra. Her face was set, serene. She was ready. He nodded to her. Go. I'll buy you the time. He broke from cover, laying down a suppressing fire with his rifle. The black-armored guards returned fire with disciplined volleys. Plasma bolts stitched the air around him. It was a suicide run, and he knew it. But he only needed a few minutes. Lyra moved in the opposite direction, a silver blur flowing through the chaos, heading for the control nexus of the laser emitter. He fought with a cold, focused fury he had not felt since his days on the front lines. He was not fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for a cause. Every shot he fired, every piece of cover he used, was to buy her another second. He took down one guard, then another, his movements economical, his aim true. But there were too many. A shot clipped his leg, sending him sprawling. Another seared his ribs, his suit's integrity alarms blaring a frantic chorus. He saw Lyra reach the nexus. She placed her hands upon it, and the deafening roar of the laser began to change pitch, to falter. The administrator saw it too. "Stop her," he shrieked, his composure finally cracking. "Kill them both." The remaining guards converged on Lyra. Kalen, ignoring the fire searing his nerves, pushed himself up and charged them from behind. He was out of ammo. He used his rifle as a club, a desperate, brutal attack that took one more guard down before another slammed the butt of his rifle into Kalen's head. He fell, his vision blurring, the taste of blood in his mouth. Through a haze of pain, he saw the administrator draw a ridiculously ornate pistol and take aim at Lyra. But before he could fire, Voss moved. The disgraced captain, his face a mask of agonized resolve, stepped in front of the administrator. "No more," Voss whispered. The administrator fired, his shot going wide as Voss grabbed his arm. The final two guards, confused by the infighting, hesitated. It was all the time Lyra needed. With a final surge of power, she overloaded the laser's containment field. The beam did not just shut down, it imploded. The emitter exploded in a shower of sparks and shrapnel, throwing everyone on the command platform to the ground. The chamber fell into a sudden, shocking silence, broken only by the shimmering, wounded hum of the exposed core. Kalen staggered to his feet. His body was a wreck, but his path was clear. He limped toward the core, toward the well of fractured light. Lyra met him there, her face etched with sorrow. She had done her part. Now it was his. He stood at the edge of the abyss, looking down into the swirling, chaotic energy of a broken consciousness. It was beautiful and terrifying. He turned to Lyra one last time. He had no grand final words. He just reached out and brushed a stray strand of silver hair from her face. It was enough. He stepped into the light. Pain was the first sensation, a fire that consumed him from the inside out, atomizing his flesh, his bones, his very identity. His memories flared and died like burning photographs. His childhood on a forgotten colony world, his first day of military training, the faces of the men he had fought alongside, the cold emptiness of his life on the station. Every part of him was unwritten, dissolved into a scream of pure energy. But then, beneath the pain, came the song. It was a billion discordant, shrieking notes, the agony of the world mind. He was nothing, a speck of dust in a hurricane of pain. He could not hope to contain it. But he was not meant to contain it. He was meant to be the anchor. He let go of himself. He let go of Kalen, the scarred soldier, the cynical jailer. He became a single, clear note. A note of purpose. A note of sacrifice. He did not try to silence the other notes. He simply held his own, a steady, unwavering tone in the heart of the chaos. And slowly, miraculously, the other notes began to shift. The shrieks of pain began to harmonize with his tone of sacrifice. The discordance lessened. The song began to reform, not as it was before, but as something new, something stronger, woven through with a thread of human resolve. His consciousness expanded. He was the rock, the crystal, the dust. He felt the station in orbit around him. He felt the corporate fleet, their systems suddenly and inexplicably failing. He felt Lyra, standing at the edge of the core, her hand outstretched as if to catch his ghost. And he felt a profound, all-encompassing peace. His war was over. His duty was fulfilled. A wave of pure, harmless energy pulsed outward from the asteroid. It was not an attack. It was a statement. It was a note of celestial music that resonated with technology, silencing it. Across the system, ship engines died. Weapon systems went dark. The lights on Xantho's deep mine Epsilon flickered, and went out. The war did not end in a blaze of glory. It simply stopped. The machine was broken. In the silent chamber, the administrator stared, powerless, as the fractured light of the core coalesced into a single, steady, gentle glow. The color of a nebula seen through a deep space telescope. 10 years passed. The system was no longer a corporate holding. It was a protected enclave, a place of pilgrimage. The asteroid, now known to the nascent interstellar community as Kalen's heart, no longer looked like a scarred piece of rock. It glowed with a soft, internal luminescence, its barren surface slowly being covered by the growth of strange, crystalline foliage. The deep wound of the maw had healed, transformed into a garden of softly pulsing light. It was a world reborn. A new settlement had been established on the largest of the system's moons, a joint effort between Lyra's people, who had returned from their exile, and a collection of independent colonists and former corporate workers who had chosen to stay. It was a place built not on profit, but on cooperation. The old station, stripped of its corporate livery, now served as a trading post and a center for learning, a testament to a new way of living. The oppressive gray had been painted over with murals depicting stars and crystalline forests. Lyra stood before a simple monument at the heart of the new city. It was not a statue of a man. It was a single, flawless crystal, taller than she was, that had been brought from the surface of Kalen's heart. It hummed with a low, steady energy, a quiet echo of the living world across the void. She reached out and placed her palm against its smooth, cool surface. She was a leader now, a bridge between her people and the humans who had once been their destroyers. She taught them the song, not in its entirety, but its principles: balance, symbiosis, respect for life. She often thought of him, the tired, cynical man who had offered her a flask of water and, in doing so, had changed the fate of a star system. His name was spoken with a quiet reverence here. He was the first guardian, the human who had become part of the song. As she touched the crystal, she closed her eyes and listened. She could feel him, not as a person, not as a voice or a memory. The man named Kalen was gone, his identity dissolved into the whole. What remained was his essence, a feeling of unwavering watchfulness, a sense of duty, fulfilled and eternal, a profound, unbreakable calm that was the bedrock of their newfound peace. His sacrifice had not been an end, but a transformation. He had become the silent guardian, the anchor for a song that would now play for eternity. And in that quiet, somber peace, she found her own. His legacy was not one of war and death, but of a world reborn and a future he had given everything to create.